You know, the objective to the Prudent Money Project is to educate you on how money works, to show you how to make better decisions when it comes to money. So we cover everything from investments to insurance to spending plans, how I don't believe in budgets. I mean, you name it, we're covering it in this entire series of teaching courses. I've been often asked if you could take everything that we've looked at and talked about in these teaching courses and funnel it down to one simple principle that's the key to making everything else work, what would that be? And it's simply this, and it very simply is to live within your means. I think everybody's pretty much familiar with the formula of living within your means. You have X amount of dollars coming in. You're going to spend X amount of dollars, and you got to make that salary or that income last as long as possible to cover all of your spending during a month. And I got to tell you that there are families and couples in their 30s or 40s or 50s, even into their 60s, who still cannot get this right, who still have not grasped the concept of living within your means. And what ends up happening is that you create a gap. X amount of dollars comes in, you spend X amount of dollars, you spend more than you make, you live with outside your means, and there's a gap, and that gap is filled with loans, it's filled with debt, and that's how a lot of people start to increase the levels of debt that they hold in their financial life. Now, I got to tell you, when I was in my 20s, just graduating from college, going into the financial services industry. Actually, I started in real estate first, but did that a couple of years going into financial services. I got to tell you, I was horrible at living within my means. I could always justify why I needed to spend extra money on the car, why I needed the better apartment rental, or why I needed to go ahead and buy a house. And I was constantly living outside of my means. And the problem is that you do that for a certain amount of time, and then you create a problem. And that's what's always amazed me, is that people can live outside of their means for a lot longer than I would think. They compensate, they work around it, they create debt, they get more loans, they create debt. We talk about this in some of the teaching videos of how this happens. And all of a sudden, one day you wake up and the have-tos, and those are the bills that come month in, month out, have to be paid. The have-tos include the rent, the mortgage, the car payment. If you don't pay a have-to bill, you get something taken away from you. Well, what ends up happening is you increase that amount of debt, that have-to starts to increase because now you're adding debt payments. The more debt, the bigger the payment, the more debt, and your have-tos grow larger and larger. And you wake up one day, no amount of rationalization is going to get you out of this mess. You've got a problem. The overnight debt problem turns into the overnight debt nightmare. And now you've got a problem. So one of the things I wanted to do is to talk about how we can get that back into balance, because it is, and we'll talk about this, it is a balancing act of the have-tos, the values, and the wants. And it's just so extremely important, because without this foundation, you can't put together a good spending plan. Without this foundation, it's really tough to plan for all your financial goals and balance those out and prioritize them and make them work. You've got to have, this is the single most important thing to do. Now, I've talked on teaching courses about advice I would give to somebody in their 20s. Boy, it's advice I wish someone would have given to me. I talk about the millennials and how the advice that I would give to them as far as starting out. And it always comes back to living within your means. This is geared towards just in general, no matter what your age is, no matter where you are in life, you've got to start to develop this talent and this habit, And here's the interesting thing about it. You've got to come to grips with reality. You've got X amount of dollars coming in. You've got to make it work. There's no more income except for that extra amount of dollars unless you decided to work a part-time job. You've got to deal with what you got coming in. And the problem is that the longer you wait to correct this problem, the longer that you live outside your means, the bigger problem that you create, and then you are forced to do it. You're forced to take the steps. And I got to tell you that if you're not in that spot right now, that's great. You're a little concerned maybe that you're living outside of your means, and that's okay. But we're going to correct that going forward. And that's the thing about the theme with a lot of these teaching courses in the Prudent Money Project is that if you're not there yet, we have time to correct it. Now, if you're there, come on, let's go together. We'll correct that as well. It's just going to be a little bit harder. It's just like with the debt series. No matter what stage that you're in, we have a solution for you. The solutions are better in the earlier stages, but as you get to the late stage 5 of the debt crisis, there's not as many options. But hopefully you're not there as far as living outside your means, and we're going to get that corrected and get you on the road to getting a balance in your financial life. And let me say this too, is that I know that can seem daunting. I know that can seem a little scary, a little fearful. It can be a little bit fearful because you're going to have to change. You're going to have to change your habits. Maybe you get a lot of joy from overspending. It brings you some short-term happiness. Well, let me tell you, this will bring long-term happiness if you stick to the principles and the steps I talk about in this program and get there and make sure that you are creating a balance in your life. I love this picture of the scale because it is a balance. The reason that people don't live within their means is there's a conflict between the have-tos, which we've talked about, being rent, mortgage payment, car insurance, the things that if you don't pay, you get taken away from you. The wants, the things you really want to spend your money on. You'd rather spend your money on this than that have-to. And then your values. Now, here's a key principle, is that all you have to do is pull open the American Express card, the credit card, whatever you use as your spending vehicle, maybe a debit card through your bank account. Look at where the money is going. That is what you value. I always say that money follows the heart, and the values are extremely important. And this is what I think is missing today when it comes to developing an appropriate spending plan, is the value aspect of it. When a husband and wife come together and they create their own set shared value system, some great things happen. And that's what I want to encourage you about as you go on this journey with me through the steps of living within your means. Now, the first one, obviously, is you and your spouse, you have to commit. Now, let me go through an illustration with you. You walk into your financial house. There's this closet that you've got all the things you don't want anybody to know about you. You've got the debt. You've got the overspending. You've got the fact you're not even close to prepared for retirement. I mean, all the things that you wouldn't go and just sit down and say, hey, let's have coffee. Let me tell you about all the things I've done wrong with my money. Right? So we lock that closet up, and we put the key in a safe place. And so visitors, friends can come over. They can walk through the house. They can see your financial house. They can see the things. They can see all the goodness of what you've done. But boy, there is a dark side, and it's on the other side of that closet. Now, introducing a man and a woman and a couple trying to come to grips with the shared value system over the toxic subject of value, that's a whole nother set of closets. I get that, okay? And I'm not trying to be unrealistic about the challenges that go into sitting down and committing to this process. That's why I created the 10 Commandments of Couple Communication. And I got to tell you, there's a few things that I can guarantee in doing what I do, but I guarantee if you can follow those steps and you can really commit to those steps, you can leave your ego at the door, you can seek first to understand, then to be understood. I mean, all these great principles, you will change communication between you and your spouse forever. And that's a process. It's not done overnight. That's always one thing that I stress, is that all of this is a process. But the objective is to get better at it day by day by day. So you and your spouse have got to commit, not to what I want, not to what she wants, but what you want together, and that you're gonna commit to this process and live within your means. Make a list of the have-tos each month. Now, this is a very critical process to go through, because once you look at the have-tos, and let's start with the basic formula, the means, the income that comes in. Let's say that it's $6,000 a month. The have-tos come up to $4,000 a month, and you have $2,000 left over. Now, that $2,000 left over is going to chase what you value. And we're going to talk about that in a second, about the value hierarchy. But you've got to start with the list of the have-tos, because those are the non-negotiables. You got to pay those come in each month in, month out. And so you got to look at, okay, how can I reduce it? Now, some of the have-tos are bad commitments that you made. You made that bad commitment to buying that expensive sports car when you really couldn't afford it, and you're paying about $300 to $400 more a month than you need to be, and you're just going to have to wait it out until you can either sell it or you pay off that debt. One or the other. It's there, it's done, can't do anything about it. So you just have to kind of wait and see. But things like the electricity bill, you could shop your electric rates. You could also go through and see what you could refinance, maybe debt-wise, to lower those payments, to lower those have-nots, to create more discretionary income. And so it's important to be able to identify together, you and your spouse, this is the list of the have-tos, the non-negotiables. How can we get this down in total overall cost so that we have more discretionary managed to go chase our values? The third one is create a value hierarchy. Now, as I said, we spend money on basically what we value. And I've told this story before in one of the teaching courses. It's probably, out of almost 26 years of doing this, probably my favorite story and favorite illustration. And I think it brings value to bring it into this course as well. I had a couple come in to see me one time. He was a doctor, a plastic surgeon, earned a very good living. And he said to me, Bob, we have a problem. I make great money and sufficient money to take care of things, but yet at the end of the month, we're always skimming by, barely making ends meet until the next paycheck comes. And I looked at them both and I said, well, that's great. Let's see what we need to do to fix this. What I want you to do is I want you to go back and take 3 months, and I want you to track where all your money's going. Track what you're spending. Don't stop. Don't spend any differently. Just track where your money is being spent, and come back and see me. Don't budget. I'm not talking about budgeting, because you know I don't believe in budgeting, as we talk about on one of the teaching courses. This is about tracking. So 3 months later, sure enough, they come in, and I thought somebody had died. They walked in the office, head hung low, very just hopeless looking, embarrassed kind of. I thought, boy, I can't wait to hear what just happened here. And so as they walked in silence, sat down in front of me at the conference table and and he pulls his head up, he looks at me, and goes, Bob, we spend $2,500 to $3,000 a month on eating out. $2,500 to $3,000. That's horrible. I cannot believe that that's where a lot of money's going. And I looked at him and I said, that's great. That's great you have identified what's important to you. And he looked at me like I was halfway crazy, but it is true. They value eating out. And they value, for a number of reasons that you can probably guess, for eating out. And I think a lot of us can relate to this. I think that's why I like this story, is because I value eating out. And if I let it get out of control, I would figure out a way to do it 7 days a week, because I'm the primary cook in our family. I grocery shop. There's a lot, and I've taken that on as part of my responsibilities. My wife does a ton of other responsibilities, and we just balance that. But if I didn't have to cook, if I didn't have to grocery shop as much, and could eat out every night, boy, that'd be great. But that's just not the case. So I think everybody can relate to that, how much you spend eating out. But let's look at what could make up a list of value hierarchy. And when I say hierarchy, I mean this is our, as a couple, this is our top value, this is our second value, this is our third value, fourth, and so on. Maybe getting out of debt is a value. Maybe eating out is a value. Be honest with yourself. Don't try to be, this is who we should be, this is who we are. And so you come up with this list of things that you value, and you go, okay, now what's our number one value? Well, in order to really make things work, we've got to value at the number one spot an emergency account. We've got to build an emergency account. We don't have one. And because we don't have one, when we get into a situation where we have the unexpected expense, guess where it goes? On the credit card. The whole idea is to decrease debt, not increase debt. At some point, you got to stop increasing the debt and get on a trajectory of decreasing the debt. So building an emergency fund, which I think is, if you haven't done so, is should be the number one value. Now, I don't want to dictate your values, but in order to make things work, you've got to have an emergency account. Now, where does eating out? Does eating out completely go off of the value hierarchy? No, it probably not. It probably means that, you know what, we're going to make all this work, and we can make this work by only eating out once or twice a week, or something to that degree, or putting this amount of money of the eating budget spending plan goes towards eating out, goes towards buying groceries, and goes towards preparing meals, whatever that is. So maybe the eating out goes from the top spot, which was pretty close in this couple's particular situation, down to 8th, 9th, or 10th. And you still have and I think you appreciate it more if you're only going 1 or 2 times a week and to selected places that aren't that expensive. I mean, you can go out and eat, and you can spend a lot of money, or you can be wise and spend very little money, maybe even with a coupon. But you're still satisfying that value that you have for eating out. So make a list of the values that you have as a couple, as a family, and then bring into it a hierarchy of prioritizing the first one down to the last one. Steps to live within your means. Figure out how to create extra cash flow. Extra cash flow. Now, if you are out of balance in a situation, and I'll describe what I call out of balance. Most of the time, you've gotten to a point where you created a lot of debt, and it's taking up a lot of the have-to money, and you're out of balance with what's left over at the end of the month. And sometimes it's just not enough to cover the want-tos that are the most important to you. So think of it from the standpoint. I always talk about debt. Getting out of debt is a season. It takes a season of 4 or 5 years, or whatever the time period is, to get out of debt. Once you're out of debt, then your options open up to you, and you have different routes you can take with your finances. And your have-nots decrease, right? So it's important to consider that maybe you need to get a part-time job to bring in an extra money just for a season. It's not obviously what you want to do for the rest of your life, but maybe it's just you and your family sit down and agree that, hey, we're going to balance out our values and balance out our finances, and I'm going to get a part-time job and work. I'm going to commit to this for 3 years, and we're going to take all that money and put it towards paying off the debt and see what kind of effect that has. Maybe it is that, one of the other things I talk about are tax refunds. If you're getting a tax refund at the beginning of the year, stop getting a tax refund. Arrange your payroll deductions to where you're breaking even and you're not giving the IRS extra money to use tax-free, and then they pay it back to you. So don't over-give to the IRS. Give just enough. If you do that, maybe you increase your monthly income by $200 or $300. That can be put into the balance of everything, and I think it's a better use of your money than getting that lump sum. What ends up happening the majority of the time when you get that lump sum tax refund, you spend it. You justify it, you spend it. Audit your spending, audit your credit cards, audit your electricity bills, see if you can get that down in cost. Audit your credit cards, audit your AT&T or Verizon or whomever you're using for a cell phone. I got to admit, I've gone through that process and not been too happy with what I found. I was being billed for things that I didn't ask for. I had subscriptions that were still charging to my account that I never took care of. The problem is we don't slow down long enough to do the audit, but you could create an extra $100, $200 maybe dollars just from getting rid of spending you don't need to be doing. Obviously, getting the kids off the payroll, getting them on their own creates extra money that can really go towards the season of retirement. Coupon clipping. I had a guest on the Prudent Money radio show who was the queen of coupons, and I was amazed at how much money that she has saved in grocery shopping just by clipping coupons and saving money. So look for ways to save money and look for ways to increase the discretionary income so that you can really attack those values and get things back into balance. Steps to live within your means. Create a savings account for a backup plan. I've already mentioned this, but I thought I would make this a step because I think it's important that you make sure that the whole goal is not to spend up to the last penny, is to have some left over. And if you have some left over, then that's not to spend, that is to go into a savings account. So the whole idea is to have some left over. We talk about this, about building a spending plan on another teaching course, but to have money left over, to start building, to add to that emergency account, to build that cash account. Because once again, the whole idea is not to increase liabilities when something happens, that unexpected expense, but to have a sufficient emergency account to pay, to make sure that you're not increasing debt. So an emergency fund makes a great backup plan. Steps to living within your means. Step number 6, create an overall spending plan and monitor. I won't go into a whole lot of detail on this because we take an entire teaching course to go through, that we go through and talk about how to create a spending plan. But it's so very important that after you get things in balance and you work to get things in balance, along the way, create the spending plan. It's a process. You got to monitor it. But once you get this like a well-oiled machine, you get to a point that it's automatic. And you and your spouse are monitoring this together. You're looking at where money's going, and you have a lot more control over the whole process of staying within your means. List of personal expenses. Now, what I mean by this is that you have your have-tos, non-negotiables, got to spend those each month. You have your wants that are linked to your values. Now you've got those unexpected expenses. One of the things I talk about in the boundary planning spending plan system is that you want to anticipate expenses coming up. So, for instance, if it's January, you got to look 12 months down the road and realize Christmas is coming 12 months down the road, and you got 12 months to plan for it. And that's something that you anticipate. But maybe it's that you have tires that need to be replaced in the next 2 or 3 months. What's going to pay for that? Are you going to start setting money aside for that? Start making a list of that and keep constantly reviewing that list so that you know this is what we've got to prepare for so we don't get caught off guard. Once again, it's about decreasing debt, not increasing debt. It's about decreasing the have-tos, not increasing the have-tos, to get you back into balance. Living within your means. Very simple formula. You increase your means, you decrease your living, or it's a combination. But like I said earlier on in the teaching course, it's coming to grips with reality. It's really understanding where the money is going. It's monitoring it. It's getting involved in your spending. It's not falling for the human nature trait, which I will call avoidance, or just hope that everything's going to work out. It's actually getting into the numbers and facing the reality of your finances.